Great. Let's get this kicked off. First off, just want to welcome everybody who's joined us here on this virtual training today. My name is Alex. I am the Director of Programs and Community Engagement at APAICS. Really excited to have you guys join us. This is one of the first of our newer APAICS Virtual Leadership Training series, especially, with coronavirus affecting how we do things. We're also learning and adapting over at APAICS, and really excited to offer a lot more of our trainings that we typically do in person, especially if you've experienced before our regional leadership academies or our national leadership academies. We're excited to bring this kind of content to you directly at home and online in an easily accessible manner. So, and a little bit about that too is if you just go to our website, you can stay up to date, sign up for our mailing list. You'll get all the information about upcoming trainings, webinars, future events. We also have our weekly APAICS in Conversation fireside chat series going on currently as well too. So I encourage you guys just to go to our website, sign up for our mailing list, and stay plugged in with us. So thanks for joining us. I hope that today's webinar is going to be super informative, and it's also very timely. It's campaigning in a digital environment. Joined today by a panel of experts here who are going to discuss a little bit about how they're learning and how you can kind of craft your own effective digital strategy to respond to COVID-19. So we have today with us Sam O, who is currently the Vice President at Targeted Victory, and also Cheryl Horry, who is the Founder and Chief Strategist at Pacific Campaign House. We're going to be moderated today by our very own President and CEO at APAICS, Madeline Milkey. And before I turn it over to her too, I just wanted to do a quick announcement that if you have any questions, for those of you guys who are joining us on Zoom, you can just submit those questions right into the chat box. For those of you guys who are tuning in on Facebook Live, you can add your questions to the comments section. I think we kind of have a packed program today. Really want to make sure that you guys out there are getting the tools and the tips that you need to be successful, especially during this interesting and unprecedented time. So we're going to try to reserve a couple minutes at the end and get to as many questions as we can. But once again, stay tuned. And you can also email us at programs@apaics.org for any other follow-up or if you have any other questions following the webinar. All right, so that I'm going to turn it over to Madeline to get us kicked off.
Thanks, Alex. Hi, everyone. I'm Madeline Milka. Thank you for joining us today for our virtual leadership training. Obviously, we know we are in unprecedented times. COVID-19 has changed how we are engaging with one another as humans, our interactions with one another in that capacity, and as organizations and as campaigns, especially with an election season upon us. Now more than ever, campaigns need to rely on strong digital strategies to reach their supporters, to get their message out, and to organize and to let people know what's happening on the campaign. So whether you're running for office, looking to expand your digital strategy, or find yourself needing to draft a plan from scratch, APAICS is here to offer that programming to help you demystify digital strategy during this unprecedented time. So today's webinar features two political campaign strategists who are veterans in this field. They both have widely extensive experience. And we are really fortunate to have them share their knowledge today. So please welcome Sam O, who is Vice President at Targeted Victory, and Cheryl Horry, Founder and Chief Strategist at Pacific Campaign House. So thank you to you both for joining us today. So our first question, which I'm going to direct to Sam first, is what are your top 3 tips for creating a strong digital strategy in this current environment?
Sure. Again, thanks for having me. So I guess just maybe to kind of kick things off and kind of talk from a more big picture approach, I think the first really important thing is to kind of understand that we need to adapt and recalibrate our direct voter contact plans on these campaigns and really kind of set clear digital objectives. And what I kind of mean by that is, I think a good campaign oftentimes will constantly reassess how effective they're being and whether what they're doing day to day is actually positively impacting their campaign, putting them in a trajectory to win on election day. And obviously in these times, I think, how we campaign, what we do day in and day out is greatly impacted. And even after, maybe the work from home quarantine status is lifted, I think how we run campaigns, whether it be ground campaigns going door to door, going to big community events, you know, there's still going to be a little bit of a difference and a little bit of a skepticism about doing some of those things, and the effectiveness will, I think, is still to be determined. So I think the first thing and the thing I'm kind of advising all my campaigns to do is reassess our direct voter contact plan between now and election day, and really make sure that our digital objectives, we have them, because a lot of times campaigns still look at digital as a checkbox that we all need to do, but we aren't quite sure what that means beyond that. So kind of understanding, hey, if we need to do lead generation, if our goal is to build out our list so we can email you and communicate with you a little bit more directly, a little bit more personally. If it's running persuasion ads, if it's, doing maybe Facebook Live videos, it's that all that needs to work in conjunction with the rest of your direct voter contact plan, the mail plan, anything else you may be doing to kind of put you in the best position possible. So I think number one, and I think I would say this, but before COVID-19, and I think it's even more important right now to make sure that we have really clear digital objectives and that we're actually meeting them, because campaigns can get a little hectic. And there's always this element of flying by the seat of your pants. So oftentimes I think it's really important to take a step back and really kind of look at some of the stuff you're doing and saying like, hey, how does this move the needle at the end of the day for my campaign? I think the second thing here is just to be active and to move quickly. And what I kind of mean by that is we know just from data that every 60 seconds, there are a million Facebook logins, there's 88,000 tweets, there's 4.5 million YouTube views every 60 seconds. And you can imagine what those numbers look like now, since we're, you know, most of us are quarantined at home. So we have this unique ability as campaigns to really kind of communicate with a lot of voters who are glued to their computers and their cell phones. So making sure that we're we're actively engaging with them from a digital perspective, whether it be daily Facebook updates. But what I also mean is like, you want to move quickly too. So like, for example, if there's any new news, whether it be at the federal level as it relates to small businesses, or like, you know, wanting to keep things very hyper local, I think those things you want to move very quickly on to see, hey, like that PPP bill that was passed in DC, you know, how does that impact local small businesses and families, and how can I push information to them in a quick manner, because people are going to be very interested in that type of information, more so now than maybe, you know, a 20-second, 30-second video on how to properly wash your hands. So I think it's really important to be active and to move quickly on digital. And I think the last thing, just from a big picture perspective again on digital, is there is no harm in repetition. And sometimes I think we try to get a little too cute and a little too smart on digital. The great thing about digital is, to drive your message, you need to use repetition. So there's nothing wrong with posting similar type things day in and day out. If you think, number one, that information is important to your campaign, or number two, if you think you're really just helping people, provide them with COVID-19 information. So, you know, I think one thing a lot of campaigns oftentimes get confused with is that they want to reach every single person in their district. But the reality is that a good campaign understands, hey, these are the audiences that we need to talk to, and we want to communicate with them as many times as possible, right? So a lot of digital strategists will talk about frequency and making sure that our core audience sees any particular piece of creative 7 to 10 times, and then refreshing that same creative, making it look a little bit differently. But we're, again, pushing the same messages over and over again, because that's how you know, it's best to communicate with voters. And so just kind of being mindful of some of that and not being shy to like, hey, this seems a little repetitive. I think that's just a good thing to keep in mind, of that, like, hey, that's what you want to do on a digital platform.
Thank you. Just as a quick follow-up before I move to Cheryl, my question for those who are maybe unclear about digital objectives, what would you describe as 3 common digital objectives?
I think number one is just, it can be persuasion. So trying to make sure that people understand who you are and what you stand for, right? And I think that's just a very simple thing that campaigns do. I think one can also be get out the vote. So if you're in the final weeks here of before a primary election, or if you're already working towards November, kind of understanding that, hey, you need to have some get out the vote contact from a digital perspective, and understanding that, hey, for you to properly do that in the final weeks of your campaign, you need to start building out some lists. So whether that's lead generation for maybe fundraising purposes, or to kind of build out your email list so that you can then communicate with identified supporters or people who are interested in your campaign. I think those are some of the objectives that I oftentimes have to talk to campaigns about, because sometimes you kind of do get into this weird gray space where some of the stuff you do on digital kind of tries to be a little bit of everything. It tries to be persuasion and a fundraising thing and a lead generation thing. And I think it's just kind of better, it can be a little bit more effective when it's a little bit simple, more simple, a little bit cleaner. So.
Great, thank you, Sam. Just as a reminder, please feel free to put your questions in the chat box if you're on Zoom, and in the comment section if you're on Facebook. So Cheryl, can you give us your top 3 tips?
Yes, absolutely. And thank you, Madeline and the APAICS team, for putting this whole webinar together. So my first tip would be to listen to your community or your constituents. If you're listening to webinars like these and you hear folks like myself and Sam giving you tips sort of on how to talk to and how to message to your folks, I think the biggest thing, the biggest takeaway for me is that every community right now is handling this situation in a different way. So if you are a person running for Congress in Texas versus an assembly person or a mayor in, say, New York City or San Francisco, in every community, they're handling it in a different way. So make sure that when you're putting messaging out there, you're listening to how your community is responding and really taking in the things that they want and that are the most important to them. And that way you're coming from a place of sincerity and you're not coming across as tone deaf. The second tip that I have is really use this moment to establish yourself as a leader in your community or your field. So if you're running for office and maybe you don't have a strong elected official background, you haven't been an elected official for the past 20 years, but you do have other leadership experience in your background, use this time to sort of show your community and show your potential voters that you are a leader, and use this as a rallying point to have them sort of coalesce around you. And then my last tip is to leverage the additional features for the platforms that you're already using. So for example, if you are already on Facebook, you already have a Facebook page, maybe make a Facebook group that's a little bit more interactive, that's private, that gives people that sense of community around us, the same mission. So people right now, I think they want human connection more than they historically have online, largely because we can't find it by going to happy hours or to social gatherings or things like that. So think about some of the platforms that you're already on. Facebook has Facebook groups, Twitter has Twitter lists, there are Google groups. Think of the things that you're already using as a way to sort of take a deeper dive to build that sense of community with your audience and your supporters. And sort of the second part of my third tip is to use this time to really take advantage to see where your supporters or your constituents are actually spending their time online. So maybe you've been putting in a huge effort on Twitter, but you're finding in this time that all of the folks who are really supporting you are on Facebook, or maybe they're on Instagram. So take this time to sort of take a step back and do a little bit of a deeper dive to learn more about the folks who are supporting you online.
Awesome, thank you, Cheryl. So I think from both of your standpoints, it basically sounds like take a step back, reassess, and then go from there. As we always talk about campaign plans, they're organic and they're constantly changing. And so this is just another version of that, of trying to make sure that you're constantly evaluating how you're doing on all your platforms, and specifically on your social channels. So the next question we have deals with some best practices. You know, what are good digital outreach practices to implement, and what do you see what works in those implementations? So Sam, why don't you start us off?
Sorry, I had trouble with the mute button. You know, one of the things I've recently been seeing that I think is a good practice, and I think that's been working really well, is just the use of kind of these low production selfie videos, because I think it brings a sense of authenticity from the campaigns and from the candidates, and it gives a kind of this opportunity for voters and constituents to kind of feel connected with candidates and different community leaders. So again, these aren't anything overly produced. You know, a lot of times I think when people think about digital, they think about panning drone shots and things that we might typically see on like a 30-second TV ad, but just like these low production, again, videos, and understanding that like how we produce these videos should be a little bit different depending on the platform they're being put on. So for example, Facebook is typically a no audio video viewership. So what I mean by that is, if you're going to do a selfie video, you need to understand most of these people are watching videos on Facebook without ever turning the audio on for the video. So in that sense, you may want to do a 20-second, 30-second video and then have it captioned. Whereas if it were to go on Instagram, understanding that most people have the audio on. So just kind of understanding that, like, hey, like there's some really good opportunities right now. Again, people, to Cheryl's point, people are looking for that human interaction and that authenticity right now. So again, like having selfie videos talking about different things going on in the community, or giving you know, current updates or something like that would, you know, I've seen really good engagement from recently. And then I guess, you know, also making sure that you kind of create that video in the right way for it to be, you know, as successful as possible on the different platforms. So.
Great, thanks, Sam. How about you, Cheryl?
I think starting off by just addressing the elephant in the room, that we are all in this together to some extent, that we all of us are dealing with hardships of varying levels, but that, you know, across the board, everyone, regardless of age, gender, income level, political affiliation, like we are all in this situation together. So like starting off by recognizing that, I think will be really important and impactful. And even on like the corporate level, like the ads that have come across talking about the quarantine and talking about shelter in place, those to me, they resonate a little bit more, because it's like, hey, like they understand. It's not business as usual. So for me, I think it's in that same vein of being sincere, being authentic, really make sure that you're addressing this head on.
Thank you. And as a follow-up question, what do you see people doing that you would not consider a good practice? Cheryl, why don't you start?
Sure. I think that there is a line in terms of sort of humanizing yourself. So really think about what your brand is. If you're an elected official, there have been a number of videos that have been going around of some elected officials doing fun things while they're on quarantine, being relatable. But then there have also been some others that have been sort of like in poor taste, where they thought that they would be funny, but have really just come off as borderline offensive. So I think that like while you're putting together this creative or this content that that's a little bit different and a little bit more personable and approachable than what you might normally do for a campaign, I would caution to sort of like stick to your brand and not trail off too far from that.
Sam, what about you?
Yeah, I think Cheryl kind of nailed it. I think people were looking to, as people were looking to be active on digital, people are looking to do things different than maybe everyone else, and I think that kind of leads to some situations where some candidates and elected leaders are making some bad decisions as far as the content they put out in the digital sphere, and just understanding that, hey, we need to kind of be sensitive to everything that's going on. Again, to Cheryl's earlier point that, each location and geography is handling this situation differently because it's so different everywhere you go. And just kind of understanding that, hey, you need to understand and have a kind of measured response on video on what you think is appropriate and what's not appropriate, and making sure that people understand that at the end of the day, you are taking it seriously, and that you caution people to take it seriously as well. So.
Thank you, Sam. So, we've always told people in our trainings that methodology has shown that canvassing door-to-door is the number one voter contact method to be able to get your message out and to persuade someone to vote for your candidate. So what advice do you have for those who have not prepared themselves with a digital strategy at all? And so they're basically starting from scratch. So Sam, what advice do you have?
I think one of the most important things is to kind of understand, maybe kind of if we're starting at like step one, like understand what your messaging pillars are, right? Every campaign has certain messages, certain things that they need to kind of push and make sure people are aware of. And like understanding like, hey, like my core message is this, and I need to get it to these people. How do I deliver that, whether it's direct mail or digital or phone calls or going door to door? So understanding what needs to be communicated and to who, and then also then kind of coming up with a game plan where, all right, if people aren't familiar with my bio, for example, all right, well, I need to kind of talk about why my personal life experiences make me a really good candidate, and why then I can fix different issues that we're facing in the community. But then if that is a huge messaging pillar to your campaign, I think you need to always kind of be mindful of, all right, well, then I need to really kind of figure out from a digital perspective how to do that. So then it's kind of looking at, again, like setting the objectives, which is, all right, if that's my objective, then I will do Facebook Lives, I will do AMAs, Ask Me Anythings, I will kind of do these personal different communications, and to make sure that people are aware of who I am, what I stand for, and then making sure that at the end of the day, campaigns are about people and relationships, and making sure you communicate. So being really good about following up with people, making sure that you take things offline. So if you get a question, maybe email them back, give them a phone call, text them, whatever it may be. And I think you can find a successful way to still campaign during these times, and if you don't have a full digital outreach strategy yet.
Cheryl, what about you?
First and foremost, if you don't have a strategy, start now. We don't know how long we're going to be in this situation, hopefully for less time than more time, but at the end of the day, we don't know. So if you don't have a strategy, it's not going to hurt you to start now. And if this is over soon, then at least, hey, you now have a strategy. But Facebook and Google have all come out and said that they're working on reduced staff. So if that means that you are trying to get your Facebook ad account verified to run political ads, that could take longer than normal. It could take longer than normal for your ads to be approved and cleared. So if you don't have a strategy in place already, start now, because we don't know how long we're going to be in this. And then to a more like tactical idea, yes, I think that person-to-person contact is so important. And for me, I think the closest way that we can achieve that online is through SMS or short message service, aka text messages. Because we have the ability to do peer-to-peer texting. We can text like, hey, Madeline, it's Cheryl, just checking in, making sure that everything is okay, if there's anything that I can do. Sort of again, thinking about that humanized and like personalized touch from your campaign in the same way that you would have a canvas or door knocking to have that one-on-one conversation, you can also do that through text messaging.
That is actually an excellent segue for the next question, because obviously all the work that campaigns, their goal basically is to get a list of people that they can connect with so that they can encourage them to vote and remind them to vote on election day. So you've now assembled, your list of people. You're continuing to persuade and try to grow that list so that you can get to 50 plus one. How do campaigns maintain this relationship? You've mentioned the SMS with their supporters in a digital environment. What other kind of messaging can they be doing, and what other techniques they can be doing in digital to continue that virtual relationship? Cheryl?
So I think that also thinking about relational organizing right now is going to be really helpful and really important for campaigns. For folks who aren't familiar, relational organizing is the idea that we're organizing through the relationships of our supporters and our constituents. So if you think of a community leader who maybe like the soccer coach or the church leader who have a lot of connections and a strong network within their community, really talking to those people. So maybe this is the opportunity that you put together a grass tops, weekly or bi-weekly Zoom meeting for those community leaders in your space to then say like, hey, when you are doing your parents' happy hour or Zoom happy hour, or whatever it might be, to like encourage them to go out and continue to share information about you and your campaign.
Sam, what suggestions do you have?
Sorry about that. Yeah, I think it's just kind of looking for different opportunities and kind of just being creative about the type of information that you can provide and how you can provide it. So I think one of the things, I think people are constantly looking for is additional information on how to navigate the government as well as it relates to PPP or filing for unemployment. People are just trying to get more information on that. So like one thing I've seen campaigns utilize recently is using SMS to send out links and asking people if they need additional help kind of navigating some of this stuff or where to look for some of this information. And then also another thing could be, whether campaigns choose to do virtual fundraisers or doing like a virtual like town hall panel with like a public health official, a doctor to kind of help do Q&As publicly. It's very similar to this, where people can submit questions and, you can get some information from like, a health expert on how to deal with some of this stuff moving forward too. I think would be good opportunities for campaigns to, again, continue to communicate with different voters up until election day.
Thank you so much for sharing those tips. For those people who are on Facebook or on the Zoom, if you have any questions, feel free to post them in the Facebook comment section. If you're on the Zoom, in the chat box. So please let us know if you have any additional questions for our panelists. I kind of felt so bad for all of my digital friends because of when the quarantine started, we started recognizing, okay, all these campaigns are now going to have to shift how we think and how we strategize reaching out to people. So I feel so much for you guys because, those overall campaign plans probably got blown up and, reprioritized how they were going to spend their resources. And most importantly, the candidate's time, so, for those people who, are looking to, candidates are also quarantined too. So, I mean, how are we keeping them engaged in the digital world? I think that's also a question I'd love to ask and hear your answers to that too. How do you keep your candidate engaged now that we're living in this virtual digital space? Cheryl?
Great question. I think that keeping candidates engaged in general is really challenging to do. in this sort of like stranger digital era, and I think that we also, there's a question in the Q&A that asks sort of like, how do we combat the spread of disingenuous and dangerous information relating to this? I think that my answer to sort of both of those questions is to shift to a more like community management online model. So for the candidate who like maybe never has time to actually respond to people on Twitter or Facebook because their staff is doing it because they're in call time or they're at events, like give them this opportunity to be like, hey, like here are all the people that are like supporting you online and that are sending you their best wishes. Like use this opportunity to have that sort of like one-on-one interaction with them, even if it's in the comments. And then the same, I think sort of like the same sort of thought about community management to how do we prevent like disingenuous information from spreading is if your team, who is maybe your field team who is knocking doors, could now be monitoring all of your social platforms and social channels for if people are posting information that's incorrect, that they can go in and they can immediately and quickly sort of like rectify that, put in the correct response, and if needed be escalate it to Facebook or take down the post.
Great. Sam, what about you?
Yeah, I think from a candidate engagement perspective, that's always like the big tricky part of campaigns, right? And I think right now candidates have a really unique opportunity to kind of do things that maybe they didn't have the time to do before when they were going to different events or on the phones making fundraising calls. So I mean, we have I'm working with candidates right now who are actually calling voters just to do check-ins. We talked about SMS. I have candidates who are doing SMS right now themselves, and like people are like always pleasantly surprised to actually hear from the candidate themselves and not from someone like me. And then I think again, just being really responsive on all your social media platforms too, using this opportunity to try to like engage with different constituents in the community, talk to them about their issues and concerns, and then like actually follow up on it, right? So if they need some additional information, if you were to actually follow up with them on it, I mean, I think those are the type of things campaigns kind of normally fall short on, and we can kind of make up for some of the the bandwidth issues by just doing a better job with how we communicate with folks right now.
So one other question that I have is, and this will be our last question before we close, and Sam, why don't you start? It's, again, budgeting, people tend to put digital way down on the priority list often at times. If you are a campaign that is more grassroots related, you don't have a digital budget, what suggestions do you have for digital outreach that can be inexpensive?
That's a great question. I think with the thing with digital, I'm sure Cheryl deals with this quite a bit, is obviously campaigns, anyone can post organically, but we need to kind of be cognizant of the fact that the algorithms kind of work against us when we just post only organically. So there needs to definitely be an investment by the campaign on some level to kind of build out their digital infrastructure, right? Because you can be very active and putting out really great content and just really kind of work Facebook. But that doesn't necessarily turn the votes, and you might not be getting the reach that you technically need to get the 50+1 on election day. So I think number one, you need to prioritize digital right now, especially things, since we don't know what things are going to be like in July or August. Hopefully things are as close to back to normal as possible. But since that is a little bit up in the air, I think it's really important for campaigns to make digital bigger, budget priority, because I think traditionally, the first thing that we all kind of budgeted always is direct mail. But those are the direct mail. As much as I'm a direct mail guy, the thing with direct mail is that, it's kind of hard to shift messaging on a direct mail piece. And with digital, we can turn things around really quickly and reach a lot of people really quickly if an issue were to pop. So again, it kind of affords us different things than some of the other traditional campaign mediums. So investing in that early, and then again, being active. But yeah, I think we need to kind of just like understand that, like, hey, there needs to be an investment. This just can't be a free and organic thing necessarily, because you may not ever get the reach that you, you know, hope for.
Thank you, Sam. Cheryl?
Yeah, so to what Sam said, absolutely have a budget for your digital in the same way that you would have a budget for your TV or your direct mail or your traditional radio. Because at the end of the day, these platforms, Facebook, Google, Twitter, I guess not Twitter anymore for political, but these digital platforms, at the end of the day, like they're there to make money. So they're going to change the algorithm, and they're going to prioritize the people who are helping them reach their goal of making more money. So definitely have a budget together if you want to meet, if you want to reach more people. And then completely lost my train of thought for the second part of that. That question. So apologies.
No, I think that was really a question of, how can you do it, if you're a grassroots campaign in a way that's inexpensive, so that people can at least sort of, put together a plan.
Yes. Sorry, it is still somewhat early on the West Coast.
You are in San Francisco, so
so yes, like in order to put together a plan, I think one of the things about digital that is helpful and that will be an investment that your campaign will have that will live on long past the quarantine is over is really tracking. And I think Sam talked about this a little bit, but like tracking the metrics for the objectives that you're setting up right now. So if that is acquisition to grow your email list or to grow your sort of fan base or your follower list, like use this time while you have a captive audience, while everyone is at home, to figure out what messaging resonates the best, to figure out which platforms that people are on. Because once this is all, said and done, I think that we will see a little bit of a drop of engagement online, just because people will be back to work. They'll be happy to be outside. They won't be stuck in front of their screens anymore. But some of those habits are gonna stay, and they're gonna stick. I don't know that we've thought about sort of like what the post-quarantine world looks like, but I'm pretty confident that a lot of the habits that we're picking up now in terms of how we're consuming and engaging with political content, those are going to continue on far past the situation.
Well, thank you to both Cheryl and to Sam for sharing their knowledge with us and their tips. If you guys would like to take a minute to provide any closing recommendations, we would welcome that. So Cheryl, why don't you start off?
Sure. I think that, and obviously I'm a little bit biased, but digital really does provide campaigns with a level of voter contact, persuasion, GOTV efforts, mobilization, and sort of that element of humanizing your campaign that is incredibly difficult to capture on other campaign mediums. So while we're seeing these massive spikes in digital consumption and media consumption while people are at home, it's really just, it's never been more important to take advantage of that.
Thank you, Cheryl. Sam?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, every campaign I've ever worked on, our chief goal was to, find a way to kind of cut through the clutter, right? Because at the end of a campaign, voters are getting bombarded with direct mail, radio, television, you name it, and then all the other races on top of the race that you're currently working on, right? So like, there's a multiplier there of like 2, 3, 4, 5, and so like, digital provides a really great way to kind of be able to kind of cut through that clutter and be able to like reach people for a quick 10-second video, and where they're only fixated on you. So like, I think it's really important to do it now more than ever. And I think being able to, again, get that captive audience for maybe 5 to 10 seconds, whereas, you know, if you've done phone banking recently, you know, it's very hard to get people on the phone. You know, so doing some things like SMS and digital right now, I think would really help your campaign. So.
Excellent. Well, thank you again to both Cheryl and Sam for spending the afternoon with us. The recording of this will be up on the APAICS website. So for any of those people who might have missed the beginning, please feel free to get back onto our website and you can see the link. So thank you very much.